Welcome to the Elevate Your Equity podcast, where we, as married busy professionals, leverage real estate investing to unlock the 3+1 degrees of freedom: health, location, time, and financial.
And today we've got a power couple on the show. We've got Johnny and Crista Nelson. They are the co-founders of Arctos Capital, which is a private real estate investment firm investing in North Dakota, Oklahoma, and Minnesota. Johnny acts as the asset manager, and Crista is the chief people officer for their firm. And prior to their activities in real estate investing, Johnny was a mechanical engineer in the medical, additive, and power industry, and also acted as a general contractor, while Crista worked in Fortune 100 companies in the hospitality and financial services sector. And I know there's a lot more behind that background. So what I'd like to do is just get into the show and ask how you guys are doing. How are you, Crista and Johnny?
Doing great. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Thanks for that wonderful and warm and probably a little too generous welcome there, guys. But thanks for allowing us to be here, and we're excited to share the little bit of knowledge that we gained in the past really a year, and of course, previous experience with your audience.
Absolutely. We're excited to get right into it. So first thing is very apparent is that Johnny, you and Crista are working together in the real estate realm. You've co-founded a company together and you both have active roles in it. So that's where we are right now. But why don't we go ahead and start early on? How did this whole passion with real estate investing begin, either with you, Crista, or with you, Johnny, or maybe with both of you?
I'll take that. I think it was me that first overheard a colleague at one of my engineering jobs. Is a cubicle right next door. And this was at kind of mid 2018. And he said house hacking. And I hadn't heard the term or knew what that meant at all, house hacking. It's not too unfamiliar of a story, but a lot of us start there and kind of get some momentum and some ideas in that space. And I just bought my first house ever in my life in 2017. So this whole idea of house hacking, and then I just had never thought about, buying a duplex and renting it out and that type of thing. So that got me really just motivated and kind of just, that's kind of the genesis, the root of a lot of things from there.
And I'll jump in. I was not on board to start with. Johnny told me I'm interested in investing in real estate. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
Why did we work so hard to, get our corporate jobs? We were finally seeing velocity in our corporate careers. And we both decided to do our master's degree before we got married. So it was shortly after we got married, he sat me down for that conversation. And I'm like, what?
and why?
Yeah.
And what are you talking
about? Eventually I came around, and like he said, he had the first house. And then the next thing we did was I bought a duplex in my name, and we continued our house hacking journey with that. So
Johnny, can you break down that conversation, especially for, couples or husbands or wives that are trying to introduce the conversation and the topic? And how did you guys, navigate that conversation and find your way to working together?
That is a fascinating and long conversations
over the course of years.
Yeah.
There was, to that point, guys, we had to actually deconstruct a bit. I'm maybe more just personality wise, and maybe I'm more passionate. Maybe there's sides of me that are maybe a little more, have impetuous and, kind of a go-getter. And there's just that, none of us can not create that or not create that, just kind of like who we are, like our height or something. That's what I think. And so that kind of snapped my attention and my kind of that excitement of that, I just snapped to that. And Crista had grown up in a house, and she could speak to that if we get to this, but that, money management and all those kinds of things was not a priority. And then when she was able to succeed in the corporate life, she, of course, they really drill into, 401k and get a good job and all those kinds of things. I know that story has been told a lot, but I had to really address that fundamental way of thinking. Again, the question is how can I align what I'm seeing with what she's seeing, and then can we get to this other state? If it's to be for us, can we get to another place? So that was how we had to step through that, and that was probably a months-long process until she finally was able to see and read some of the things that I was saying, and that is be sure your spouse is consuming some of the same media and books and interviewing talking to some of these people that you are. So you're not like, 6 months ahead of them and they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. No, Johnny summarized it really well. And I think a lot of it for me was I had some limiting beliefs that I had to work through. But when I sat down and really started to crunch the numbers and look at our financials and start to see the ability and the opportunity to have that financial freedom by having our own rentals. And that was when we were small scale, right? Single family duplexes, things of that nature. I started to see the compounding of that money and just how it could work for us. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we might be onto something. So I started to get excited about it when I was able to see the financials. And one year, I just calculated like our gross rent collected, and it was even before this 44 unit deal that we closed on. And it well exceeded what I was making kind of mid-career. And I'm like, that's a really good salary. Like, yes, you have expenses, tied into that, and taxes, all this stuff that's going to take away a little bit from that money. But still, it really hit me like this is a way to move forward and have that time freedom.
Yeah, very good. I think that that's an excellent way to begin. It sounds like you guys independently studied this real estate stuff and then eventually came together to the same conclusion independently, which is definitely a unique spin. Was there anything before that happened? Like, I know there was like a month-long period, Johnny, you were mentioning, where there's a little bit of disagreement there, right? And then eventually, Christa was able to kind of like get into that with you. Was there any like pre-conversations behind this that took place about where you guys want to go vision-wise?
No, it was probably a bit disjointed. At first it was like, we're going to do real estate and this is cool. And, we're in Minneapolis and there's a lot of neat things going on.
Yeah.
And then later it became like, then after we joined, and this is jumping kind of like skipping maybe a year and a half ahead. And then we started learning about, like mindset and, more deliberate goal setting and some of those other things that are kind of crucial for this type of relationship and path of life.
Mm-hmm.
And then those conversations kind of happened after the fact.
Interesting. So would you guys recommend the path that you guys took in jumping in with the course material, so to speak, right away? Or do you think that it would be better to start with the vision first? I'm curious your guys' take on that.
I think it's different for every relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We definitely butted heads about things, especially in the beginning. And Johnny, thankfully, with his construction background, we were putting in a ton of sweat equity on our first deals. We were just like, working our 40-hour-a-week jobs and doing all we could really in our free time, which, let me just say, live-in flips are very stressful. It's not for everybody. Like,
wasn't for us.
Yeah, I mean, that could potentially break up a marriage if you did it for too long, I think. But we were able to commit ourselves and work together, and it improved our communication. It caused us to have to align ourselves more, talk about our goals more, and just talk about the business every day. I know that's not for everybody, but for us, it worked. And the more we talked about it, the more we became aligned. And we just kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say struggled through it, but we pushed through it. And then about a year and a half ago, we started really educating ourselves in the multifamily space. And I would say at that point, we both knew enough about real estate where we could have an informed conversation together before taking this next step. So I think there was a bit of a transformation in our journey. When we started, it was kind of like Johnny had this wild idea, like, let's do this. I'm like, okay, I'll try anything once, but reluctant. And then by the time we were ready to make the large step into the multifamily and education space, which was also a bit of a financial investment for us, just for the education piece, we did talk about that more. And definitely we're both on board before we took that new step. So I hope that explains it better.
No, it does. It does. And I appreciate you guys giving us the insight behind some of these, I would say, intimate details of what was happening, behind the scenes. And I think that you guys said it beautifully that it was a kind of a quick, like a dirty process, like a process that just happened organically and there's no real like, flow to it at all. Sometimes it gets messy, right? In the beginning.
I think you guys described it. You guys pretty much described our story as well as we were getting into the whole investing process. And I'm just curious too, how are you guys able to leverage your skills from your corporate jobs into this new venture?
That's a question I think is fun. And that really emerged, and I'll let Christa follow up with her part of that. That part really emerged. So that was after we got, besides just like, I'm going to sand this door and you're going to like paint this wall, that's pretty, that's pretty hard. And it's not, not too insightful, or you can't really scale that. But after we got the 40 unit under contract, or the 44 unit under contract, my partner and I, Mac, we were doing underwriting and the sourcing and this and that. And Chris and I were doing some tours together, but it was mainly me doing it. And then she didn't really know her role yet. I didn't know her role, and like, what are we doing? And like, maybe you do look up rentometer and help me underwrite. And it was real messy and real, just not real defined. And then after some time, when we saw how much there was to do, it was like, there is vastly more here to do than can be done by 3 people. So we're going to have to, just take what we can and manage it. So I just focused on what I could do. And that was the, like I said, construction, or what we're going to talk about that perhaps later, construction and some other things. And then Christa, in her role, it emerged all the different things she was really good at. So Christa, I'll let you take up that part.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I am grateful that I spent time in corporate America and working for these very large companies with very solid systems in place, because it taught me just the foundational skills like follow-up, organization, how to talk to people, how to be respectful and professional with people all throughout the spectrum of real estate, right? Whether that's your resident all the way to someone that might be an investor with you, right? We all know we have difficult conversations in this space. But to Johnny's point, my role when we first got this 44 unit deal under contract was not the most clear, because my background is HR. I've been an employee relations consultant. I've done employment investigations. I've done a lot of things in human resources. But I'd say my passion is people, right? And relating with people, and also integrating systems that are going to help the business. But what we did find with this 44 unit deal is, after the underwriting, after the LOI and the offer was accepted, right? We're under contract and we have a ton of work to do. 40 units of this building were brand new. There was no marketing plan in place. There was no website. The address didn't even exist on Google. So those are the things that I jumped into, the things that you can't think and analyze forever. You just kind of have to do it. I got the Google address set up. I started working with a website design company. I started our marketing plan and what that looks like. And then, of course, we ran into some things with the affordability space that we didn't anticipate. And our property management group that we hired at that time, unfortunately, told us they didn't really want to deal with that piece of it. So I had to just dig into that part of the deal and understand it, because no one else on the team did. And it was a big part of our deal. So just the little things like that. But I would say managing the people and the processes was where I came in. And coming from a corporate environment, absolutely, it helped me with that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there, Christa, because in my experience, I've done the exact same thing. I worked as a project manager for a long time, and kind of also in the construction realm, because I was involved in like creating all of the plans upfront to construction, and then during construction, and then afterwards for closeout. And I would say that like learning how to treat people respectfully and learning what incentivizes people, right? To either act the way that you expect them to act, or to act the way that they need to act in order to get the project done on time. I think that's a really important skill, and something that we're probably going to explore a little bit more on Johnny's side as well, as we talk about construction, because that is a very tricky piece. And I can totally relate with how you learned a lot of those people skills from corporate world and how it actually translated into success over in real estate. So thank you for that.
so exciting to see that emerge. I think that was probably you can see that I'm kind of actually joyful about it, because
Yeah.
I was like, I'm really hoping we can work together, just kind of high level, like I really wanting us to work together, and I think we can do it. I know we're both smart and we're ambitious and we can do these things, but where each puzzle piece fit together, it was very unclear initially, and then all of a sudden it emerged, and it was like so strong and so very synergistic, and it was really exciting to see both of us just find that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's explore that just a little bit more, if you don't mind. I know, Christa, you were about to say something, but I'm pretty sure you'll be able to add on to it here with this question. So we're going to head into doing construction, because I know that, for this show, we really want to give our listeners practical tools about how to do things in a specific knowledge set for each property that they're taking on, and for what roles they want to take on. So let's talk a little bit about how looping your spouse into the construction process may give some advantages. Because I know, Johnny, you come from a general contractor background, you have mechanical engineering, like that's just the way that you think. But were there any strengths or any points in time where you were able to draw from Christa's wisdom or from her insight in the construction process as a whole?
I was able to draw, if I make the question, what kind of wisdom and knowledge and personality could I ask her and consult with her? And there was a lot of those times where you just had to just chat with each other. So let's get specific here. The builder right at the end was just not performing. He wasn't wrapping it up. He wasn't, putting the hardware in. He wasn't getting the last paint on, hanging the doors, all those final things that, the building is not, you can't rent it out unless those things are done. Anyone in construction space knows exactly what I'm talking about. And then, so it was getting pretty chippy with the builder. We had a meeting, we had multiple meetings, multiple messages, meetings. And then I got a little probably too aggressive with the builder, and his personality is that when he's slighted is that of a large child. He was shouting, and he stormed out of the room, and it got kind of ugly. And constantly, multiple times through that, I was like, I don't like the conflict, but I will get loud and aggressive with somebody if I have to, if I feel like I need to. So Christa really helped me through that. So again, back to what is the question? What can I rely on in the construction space? Okay, you have like two basically apes, yelling at each other. I'm probably more sophisticated ape than the other guy. That's my own opinion. But then again, you need somebody, maybe a cooler head, your wife, to counsel you. Like, okay, like maybe say these things. Don't send that message like that.
Yeah.
Multiple times like that.
We had a moment in time where I felt like I was Johnny's HR advisor, which was like one of my prior roles. The managers can just call in. It's a hotline. Should I do this? Well, no, not if you want to get fired, that kind of thing, or get terminated or written up for that. But we did have one meeting in particular. It was in August, and we had been in the inspection process since July. Unfortunately, the builder had started another project midway through finishing the build, so that took away from it. But exactly what Johnny said, I think we were able to even each other out in those moments. If he was worried that he was maybe being a little too reactionary or something in a message or an email, he'd ask me to just take a look at it. I wasn't doing that for every communication, but we're all human, right? Sometimes you just need a sounding board. So I think that was a strength in our marriage at that point. And I would say in the very intense meeting, I definitely stepped in as kind of like a neutral third party. Like Johnny kind of had to give the tough messages and kind of be bad cop. And I was kind of the good cop in that meeting, which I think like worked really well. Otherwise, the meeting probably would have ended in yelling match or something.
He was willing to walk away. He was willing to cancel the deal. So it was close. I mean, I know probably we've all seen some of those situations or heard about them, but he was willing to just walk away and have it fall through.
Yeah.
It's funny, you guys, because we keep forgetting that when we're so wrapped up in the real estate business or in any business in general, that really what's behind it is just people and personalities. And so sometimes, we forget that there's that lens that we're looking at through to work with our partners, with our vendors, with our investors, with everyone. But there's personalities there that we have to keep in mind, right? So I think that's fascinating.
So true, Derek. So true.
And tension can change people's personalities.
Yes,
Like hearts,
indeed.
tensions and stress. Absolutely. Like this person is great to deal with like 95% of the time, but get them in a stressful or time pressure situation and things change. And of course, they knew that we weren't happy with the progress. So that didn't help. But managing through that absolutely is key.
Yeah, I think that keeping things together, coming to an agreement with people and leveling things out a little bit is definitely worth its trouble. And unfortunately, some people don't have those skills. And so that's why I think it's really important to leverage the knowledge and wisdom and maybe even the cool-headedness or the perspective of your spouse in a situation like this. So I think this is why we're spending so much time on it, because again, it's another reason why we implore people, if they're going to do business with real estate, which is a people-based business, that you got to have someone on your side like your spouse that can help you in places like this where maybe you have a blind spot or you don't know what you're doing and you don't even know it, right? You don't know what you don't know. So I think that that's really, really cool.
For sure. Yeah. And helps you to balance out your own thinking. And you're like, I was upset, I was upset a lot, because this guy was like, and again, that might go back to your own personality, recognize like, what do I like to see? And what is my strengths and weaknesses? I like to see things done at a high level. Again, that builder and engineer background, I things like fast and efficient and done really well and high quality. And when I don't see that, I just burn up. So you have to, it's fantastic to your point, Derek, that you can rely on somebody to, make your message neutral versus overly spicy.
Yes, of course. Sometimes taking the emotion out of the message will help. It depends on the person you're working with. And that comes with time, right? To know that person's personality. Now, what I want to do is I want to shift gears. We're still going to stay in construction, but I want to ask you guys, and this is to both of you, right? What are some of the biggest red flags that you can identify when you start looking for contractors to work with in the beginning?
The biggest red flags is probably their own process and their own system and what kind of crew they're running. And we have kind of this is like a general statement across the business of the construction space. And that is the high price, and especially in today's market and, last couple of years in today's market, and you have the high price folks in general running a really well polished crew, excellent processes and systems and other things. And then our perspective was the money was super tight. So we're trying to do it on the cheap and we got burned again and again. So that's kind of like, and people have said this, maybe you think, I guess I thought like, well, I could, with my construction background, I can just like force it through and get it done. This is like our own project. This is not this project, but other projects. And this is somewhat related to this. And that is, that trying to go cheap and is actually cost you in the long run.
And that was earlier in our real estate journey when we're like, well, we have to watch costs somehow. So maybe this is one way to watch costs, because we like to use really good materials and it's hard. We also learned that through our journey. Like, when do you stop? You have to stop on some projects. Like, we've had a few duplexes from the early 1900s and you have to stop. You can't do everything. But to Johnny's point, we definitely learned the hard way, unfortunately, on a couple projects that, trying to look for that value is in the long run not really a value. So
understood.
Yeah.
Can you guys share some rough rules of thumb for like rehab costs or unit turns that you've learned along the way that really work well for you guys?
We can like do a deep dive, or like 1,000 square foot apartment. We're coming in around, so like something that we've done in here in the Minneapolis, and it's definitely regional too. So we were doing like down to the studs, but everything else we were getting like, maybe 40K, and that was with us doing a lot of the work. So that, like, where did that number come from? That number can give some encouragement to people out there starting as we were. Maybe you don't have a lot of capital. We didn't necessarily have a lot of capital. And if you maybe have the time, but you don't have the money, as people say, then you can get something, done, new flooring, new fixtures, new cabinets and things like that. And that's the prices, that's the price that we came in on several units that we did. So that's a 40K Minneapolis number. You leave the sheetrock on the walls and everything else gets painted, and new flooring and cabinets and things like that.
New appliances. Yeah.
New appliances. Yep. Awesome.
Yeah.
And so how much of that would you guys say is material versus labor? Just out of curiosity.
Probably. So then if you're paying yourself or not, of course, that price would go up. So the percentage probably was probably a third labor and 2/3 materials.
Got it. And this is for like kind of this high level flip, right? Like this is something that you're trying to do to either reposition the entire asset from the inside so that you have a high paying tenant coming in, like kind of a B type or B plus, A minus type tenant, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's something, just to Chris's point earlier, is like, well, we have to put the brakes on ourselves. Like, we're going to live here. We want this to look nice. We want the high paying tenant. And how far do you go? That is that target class. And it's really like we're living in one of our places right now, and fully with the intention to rent it out as soon as we, make our next move. And we like living in that kind of space. So, we kind of do it for ourselves, but we know that also the kind of tenant it's going to attract. So it seems to, as far as the avatar that we're targeting, we know what it is and you know where to take it.
Got it.
And we've done well with that model. Like right now we live in Northeast Minneapolis. It's a relatively older area of Minneapolis. A lot of the houses are early 1900 builds. But what we did was we got some duplexes that were quite distressed, early 1900s, and we went in and just added a lot of forced appreciation and making things modern. Everybody loves new LVP and shiny appliances, granite countertops. Some people might say like, well, why would you put a granite countertop in that unit? But I think it paid off for us, so we definitely took C assets and then we're able to raise the rents more than we would typically, and more to like an A minus type asset, even though the asset is quite old. It's still a 1900s built house. But for whatever reason, in Northeast Minneapolis where we live, the duplexes, they do really well. We never have any issues filling our duplex units.
Excellent.
People want to live in them.
Yeah. And that's because you guys are doing all this work up front, right? And you guys have a plan and a budget. And that leads me to my next question is, I know that early on during the inspection process, when you're looking at houses to potentially purchase either through a wholesaler or through an agent or wherever your source is, or if you have direct, mail campaigns, whatever set up, when you guys are doing your inspection, I know that a very important part of that is to walk the job with your contractor during inspection. So can you guys talk us through a little bit about how you guys build scope and then how you guys are working with the contractor to build the budget? Like, what does that conversation look like for you guys?
Well, the conversation, Derek, is pretty easy when you're the same person. You're the investor and the contractor.
Correct.
And the inspector. And it's one of those secret powers, or the extra little zing you can bring to your own projects. And because a lot of people do need to rely on the contractor, they need to establish a good relationship, and they need, maybe the inspector is someone else. And then so all kind of, there's a lot of personalities and things, professions or disciplines to manage there. It's very simple. And it's a little bit cheating, probably like, well, whatever, that doesn't apply to me. But if you do have the skills and you do have the ability to also think as an investor thinks, that's probably the part that I had to grow into. So as an engineer builder, I had to grow into the investor space. Somebody else may be an investor and they might have to grow into the builder space. So that to your original question is simply seeing the things that need to be replaced. So you start with the foundation, you look at the roof, look at the siding, all the things that are going to keep the house from rotting away and serious damage. Then decide on the quality of finish and how many, basically you start pricing things out. All the floor needs to be replaced. The cabinets need to be redone. I'm going to leave this bedroom, that type of thing. And that's kind of just how the scope of work just kind of grows from there, and you start putting pricing on things.
Yeah. Could you expand a little bit more on like the negotiation between, like, so if you had to give advice to someone who maybe doesn't have the skills that you have, Johnny, like what could some of these investors start looking out for as the scope's being built? And maybe that's to both you and Christa as well.
I would have to take myself outside of my normal methodology and things I've heard and seen other people do. Actually, we did a flip back in North Dakota, and that was actually, we hired a general contractor there.
Yep.
So you have to commit to spending a lot of time on the phone and also visiting the property initially and interviewing people, and also continually following up and having trips. But potentially you have to have some trips back as well. So that's the way I think, like look at like David Green's book, flip, whatever his book was, flipping, that's kind of his model. That's how he started, from Bigger Pockets, was, flipping houses in other states. So he developed that model pretty well. And then, so that's what I would recommend is don't try to like be better at, because you're not going to do the work anyway. And you're not going to become proficient and know quickly enough how to become a builder and a carpenter and all these things. Eventually you can learn, and that might happen organically. If you've already identified the property, then that's too late to start learning how to lay flooring and hang cabinets, and you're probably not going to do it anyway. It's just going to be impractical.
Right.
So, yeah,
what's
yeah.
going to be your best use of time, right? Like once you've got that identified, and as long as you can keep the scope reined in and start to get to know some of the terminology, eventually it's a diminishing level of return, right? For what it is that you want to do or what you have skills in that you're leveraging to get yourself into a higher place with your business, right? And not focusing on the construction aspect.
Absolutely. So yeah, connections, contacting, interviewing, learn to interview good.
Mhm.
And then I think that will lead to a relatively decent amount of success. And then you hopefully you develop you get in contact with the right people and develop good trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe Christa, do you have any extra advice here, or maybe anything that you've seen from a process standpoint that might be able to help from a practical point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Johnny said when we did that out of state flip, it was 4.5, 5 hour drive for us. So just a couple things that worked. And Johnny did a great job managing this, but we let the contractor know that we were going to have frequent follow-ups with him. We
Nice.
let him know upfront, what our expectations were, what our timeline, what our budget was. And we really did just follow up with him quite frequently. We had weekly meetings at the very least, sometimes daily meetings. And luckily, as far as like sourcing the materials and things of that nature, we had some relationships that we could leverage in North Dakota, which Johnny worked really well with that. So if the contractor was giving us too high of a price, we kind of tried to sub things out or make a few concessions with the materials that we were using just based on those relationships. I would just say, setting expectations clearly up front, following up and sticking to your plan to follow up, because if you're canceling meetings, not getting in touch with the contractor, they're not going to take it as seriously anymore. And then, of course, when the job is done, inspecting the job and really having like a candid conversation with that contractor. So my knowledge in that space is not as in-depth as Johnny's, but if I had to break it down, those were the things that worked for us.
That's awesome advice. I just have to add something here too. I had a situation, Johnny, in which we were not doing what you guys have both advised. And our contractor for a property where no one was local, we had just a property manager who was local, but wasn't involved because it was such a heavy lift from the beginning.
Yes.
A contractor that we had hired off the street, which is already a bad sign, was sending us photos for rehab draws from other units that he was doing.
I thought you were going to go there. I was like, don't go there, don't go there. And you went there.
So what was happening? Is we were buying material, and he was like using the material for other jobs where the other clients were paying him straight out, just like we were for time and material. Right.
Wow.
And so he was taking pictures of his other units and sending us progress as if that was ours.
Yes.
And I don't know how many people he was doing that for, but then he ended up skipping town once we found out what was going on. So it's just interesting that you guys that are listening to this, please take Johnny and Christa's advice seriously, because it can turn a seemingly good job into kind of a nightmare, which is what we experienced on ours.
Yeah. So for our listeners, just to prevent them from experiencing that nightmare, Johnny and Christa, do you have any tips or systems that you use to track all these costs and just to keep on top of everything that's going on, especially when you have multiple projects going on?
Pretty unsophisticated, frankly, spreadsheets. And I know others say this as well. And this was a year maybe into our journey, and not having come from like the accounting or the business background necessarily. So like, obviously when you're working for corporate, you have accountants and they're doing whatever the hell they're doing. Like, yeah, you get my paycheck, and that's not your thing. And so this also you're the accountant, you're the CPA, you're the project manager, all these things. So yeah, just a spreadsheet. And I basically, the builder was actually pretty good for keeping track of the costs and what it was being spent, that type of thing. So definitely we're able to lean on him. But your question is like, maybe like Derek's point, like, yeah, he could not be keeping, maybe the builder was not trying to be fraudulent, but just keeping really poor records of the costs that were done. And I would just, yeah, so I don't have any like direct answer to that, besides just like, taking pictures of all the receipts, scanning it to Stessa, or, uploading it to some, digital portal, or saving every receipt with a board with a big nail in it. There's lots of, I guess there's kind of like maybe just some things you just would, ideate on and come up with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And last question here before we move on, because we could talk about this all day, but I want to make sure that you, the listeners, and us were able to move on with the rest of our day, right? But I want to ask you guys, what type of contract structure do you guys usually like to do? Like, do you have like an initial draw and then it's done per line item, and then there's like a final punch list where that happens? Could you guys like help walk us through what you guys normally do for your construction projects?
That's an interesting question. I know the people that do a lot of flips have a much more refined process. And again, with me having the construction background and simply just doing I'm the GC, and I know everything that's going on, and I have my scope of work, and I have my costs that I want to see, and I'm keeping track of all the supplies from Home Depot or wherever I'm sourcing the material. And I just have all the subs. I just like the subs are doing, I just have them like, okay, you're doing the window. Here's the cost. Here's what you need to do. Here's the hours. Here's the breakout. So just kind of managing the subs. So yeah, definitely not something I could point to as like a sophisticated system for either a flipper or per job. And that's me. If we go back to different things can help different people. So if you go back to Robert Kiyosaki's, you want to be a technician, his breakout of that with technician, investor or business person. I was absolutely being the technician, getting there, doing everything. If we want to get legacy wealth and lasting value in our lives, that's really not the path. So it's cool that that whatever that I could do it or whatever, I felt kind of good about it and doing this and that. But long term, I guess I'd counsel the listeners to do less of that.
And Christa, do you have any advice? Because now I want to just really quickly adjust this over to multifamily. I know that there's a lot of skills that both you and Johnny can use from Johnny's like GC mindset, GC background for doing unit turns. I know that sometimes like we end up like relying on our property managers to do turns in multifamily, but is there anything maybe that you can add to this from your perspective about like watching processes and helping Johnny with unit turns, or do you guys have anything set up for that type of work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with our most recent deal, it's a bit interesting because 40 of the units are brand new.
Right.
So we are really hoping that there's not much to do for turns, at least for the first 3 to 4 years. But I think one thing that stood out to us is our property managers. They gave us some really high quotes for just simple things like painting. So my suggestion is to just trust your gut and always get 3 quotes. Especially with that type of thing. They were quoting us a little bit high on some of the handyman services, just really simple things too, like light bulb changes and things of that nature, and not like fixing huge components or anything. Just trust your gut, get multiple quotes, and communicate with your property managers like what your expectations are for the cost of a turn. Johnny, I'm trying to remember, we got some just really high quotes for just painting the units. Like, didn't they say like $2,000 to paint a unit or something for a turn?
Oh my gosh.
And the numbers just don't make sense there. So just be careful and eventually like check their references, obviously. But if you don't feel comfortable with what your PM is suggesting, it's okay to bring on a sub or someone else that you can find to do the work.
And that comes from getting the multiple quotes. And one thing I would also add to this, and maybe Johnny, you can confirm or refute this, is that when you have a contractor come on board, try to imagine in your mind's eye how much the material is going to cost. Like you can go to Home Depot, you could see that, and then divide out how much of that labor component is at a reasonable hourly rate with however many people you think it's going to take to do the work. Like try to figure out what the man hour cost is you're going to pay. Right. So if it's like a $2,000 job and it's only $200 in paint or $300 in paint, because you're just painting like a living room or just a 1-bedroom apartment, and then you're ending up paying like 40 or 50 hours worth of painting, something's not right there. Right. With that labor component.
That's a great mental shortcut there, Derek. When as investors, and you're kind of like an animal in a new environment, and you're scared, and like you're people trying to take advantage of you, and you're kind of looking around, and you're kind of on your guard. And we're absolutely to that idea there. We should absolutely develop some basic gut checks and some simple rules of thumb, which you've asked about for a couple times. Is that type of like approach when you're coming up to it, and that's something that, like, for example, that I have to divorce myself from, because like I know more in more detail what something should cost and some other things. But from an investor's perspective, maybe don't have that. You can also gauge. So the one other metric that you're looking for there is the time. So materials, and then you say, well, they're going to be like 4,000, whatever, $5,000 worth of work. And then you ask them how long it's going to be. So then there you've gauged your other multiplier, right? So first, so it's this time, the materials plus time times an hourly rate. And you can kind of deduce that from when they're going to be done. And then you can really dial that in, like, oh my God, they're making like, $110 an hour.
Yeah,
because
they sound right.
They just told me
Yeah.
it's going to take them 2 days. That's an astonishing rate of money.
Yeah, exactly. And unless the situation is, well, they said they're going to get it done in 2 days, and but still, I guess it's the number of hours, like how quick it needs to get done, how many crew members are there, and then what that extra built-in multiplier for profit is. I think that's a pretty cool, yeah, definitely a good way to think about it. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys. This is awesome. Have a lot of great knowledge and expertise here that we're able to draw from and pass on to our listeners. So we're going to head into the final segment of the show, which is called the Rapid Round. And it's the same 5 questions that we ask every one of our guests, and they're meant to be answered in about 30 seconds or less. One answer for each person. So are you guys ready?
So ready.
I'll go ahead.
Absolutely.
I'll read the odd numbered one, and Sophie can read the even one. But number 1 is, what book has had the biggest impact on each of you, and why? Outside of the Rich Dad or the Bible, because we get those all the time.
For me, recently, and I have to say recently, I think one that has shifted my mindset is Who Not How, and really talking about, okay, you need to get away from doing everything yourself. You need to, even if it's painful, rip off the Band-Aids, start developing those systems, get some sort of system of organization in place, and find the right people. Always be thinking about building your team and who the right people for your team is. We're still working on that. It's a work in progress for Johnny and myself, and just looking into the future, who are the right people to put on our team. But I think that is a growth area for us in the last 3 to 4 months. And it's something that will probably be lifelong. But that book has made a huge impact for me lately.
Excellent. Good answer.
A book I read a couple years ago, and that is the book by Nassim Taleb, Anti-Fragile. I'm big on decision making. I really enjoy the process of decision making and how to think and how to understand the world and the things around me. I really appreciate his philosophy and his ways of approaching things. And I've read it, like I said, he's written a number of books. And the one that I probably his best work so far is the concepts he lays out in the book Anti-Fragile.
Yeah, love it. And for those who don't know what that is, just think Black Swan events. Those are really, really big things. And I would encourage the listeners to find out what that means. Anyway, go ahead.
Good teaser. Good teaser.
Yeah,
there.
it is. I love it.
I remember
For
Johnny
him.
talking about that now. I'm like, oh, that sounds dramatic. I should put that on my list. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Next question is, if people wanted to emulate your success, what is the first actionable thing that they could do to follow in your footsteps?
I'd say education. For me, education. I think about starting our journey in 2018. I knew very little about investing in this type of investment. I knew a lot of like what corporate America tells you to invest in, like your buy a house, W-2, 401k, all that kind of stuff. But education, I still have ways to go. I think I've committed to learning something new every day. But I think if you can commit yourself to that, it's not going to be overwhelming, and you would be very surprised at the progress that you can make. I would say for me, education, learning something every day, related to real estate and investing.
Nice.
I would say the proclivity or the basically taking action, having a propensity for taking action. And And absolutely, you kind of season or kind of like maybe blunt the front edge of that action with education. But I definitely would like, maybe it's like an 1/8 education and 7/8 taking some action. That's how I would say that. And then maybe that's just our different personalities, how we feel like we should, step in or grow into something. But for
True.
me, that is that taking, like, even though you don't know the next step, but it's exciting and there's something that you feel called to, take a small step in that direction. And then you will then understand, just by being in that space, where to take the next step.
Yeah, Johnny, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. But at the same time, Christa, you've got to understand to cover your downside risk. So completely agree with both those perspectives. They've got to be in balance.
Yeah. And I would say too, that what's nice is that when couples, like, one presses on the gas and one presses on the brakes, like you have both components, that actually makes for such a synergistic and complementary,
powerful
couple,
combination. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there is a danger in not taking enough action if you're so focused on needing to know all the answers. But I will say we've had to just jump in and figure things out. Like, educate as you go can also be a strategy. So
absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
All right. Number 3, you guys, what is one tool, process, or hack in the last 3 months that's helped you save time and or effort?
I like leveraging Asana, and then also some CRM tools. Those aren't, I know that's not groundbreaker, but groundbreaking or that novel. A lot of people are using that, but basically taking it up, deploying it or employing it for our own selves and seeing how effective that can be. That's been pretty exciting and very effective.
As far as our hack or improving our processes, I see it as an area of improvement for myself personally. I do find myself doing things manually that I should not be doing. So that I'll just say that's an area that I can definitely grow into. I am still educating myself on the best way. We've talked about potentially getting a VA or things of that nature. But what I can say is, I guess specifically if I think about Airbnb, we do some short-term rentals. So I've tried to educate myself more on how to automate that system. And I think they have added some automation tools that have made things easier too. So I'm trying to get more comfortable with their technology and like automating the check-in messages and syncing calendars and things of that nature. That has been helpful. But I'll say it's a work in progress.
No worries. It's all good. Thank you very much for sharing that, being vulnerable there. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And next question is, if the people that you know had to describe you with one word, what would that word be?
Hardworking, determined, and persistent for myself. That was 3 words.
But they center around the same theme. So there you go. And for you, Christa?
For me, I would say dedicated. I think I'm someone where people can really count on me, just that steadfastness or dedicated. When I commit to something, I commit. Sometimes we can struggle with shiny object syndrome, right? Like, oh, this is really hard. I'm gonna shift my focus to this. But dedication in the moment is something that has served me well. And I think if you're able to show up, the first step is showing up, right? 80% of getting something done is just showing up. So sometimes that can be the dedication that you need to get started, but it also means showing up for yourself, right? And taking that time to just better yourself. So I would say dedicated.
Excellent. Number 5, last question is, what small thing do most people not know about you?
We like to swing dance. That's kind of speaking for both of us, but we do like to swing dance. I love jazz music.
Nice. I think that covers it. That's pretty great. I love it.
That's awesome.
Very cool. Cool. Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure having you here, and thanks for sharing all of your wisdom and all these great little nuggets of these pearls of wisdom that we got to commend you guys for. So thank you guys for working on yourselves and sharing all of your knowledge with us. And before we go, why don't you guys tell us how the listeners can find out more about what you guys do or what's going on in your world right now?
Well, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be on your show and sharing the things we've learned. Many wise people have showed us the way, their ways, and we've just taken those things and incorporated it. So it's a shared knowledge, and it's really nice to be able to share with others as well, your audience as well. Basically, our email would be Arctos Capital. It's ARCTOSCAPITAL@gmail.com. And also, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and those probably are the best ways to connect with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I second that. I'm active on social media. You can find us at the Nelson Connection. If you like Instagram, we've got links to our latest property. You can check out our latest project. It's 28parkmpls.com. You can see our most recent project that we're really proud of there. But also for me, I recently took over the Minneapolis Invest Her chapter meetup. So if you jump onto meetup.com, you can find us there. I'm revitalizing the group. I just added some happy hours and events. And of course, everyone is welcome. But the group is, I would say, a little bit more tailored to helping women investing in real estate and looking for that financial freedom. So I can send you the link afterwards, but that's one way to find me. And I'd love to connect in person. I really do prefer that versus social media or even a Zoom call, quite honestly. So we're pretty available. Just reach out. We're always happy to talk.
Excellent.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. And once again, it was a pleasure having you on. So thanks for hopping on with us.
Thank you
Absolutely.
both. It was fun. Take care.
Absolutely, for sure. And for everyone that's listening on the show, thank you guys for listening to the very end. We really appreciate you. And please, we'd like you to like, subscribe, or comment wherever you're watching or listening to the content. And this is all towards that objective of appeasing the algorithm gods so that we can get ourselves further up that list, so we get exposure to more people and then have the opportunity to bring on more fantastic guests like Christa and Johnny here. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. And so for now, this is Derek.
And this is Sophie.
We are signing off for the day. Thanks, everyone. Take care.